presentation today is from Matthew Wayman of National Highways. Matt is a senior pavements advisor within the Safety, Engineering and Standards team at National Highways. IAT has a good relationship with Matt's team at National Highways, and we thought it was important that, certainly from our institute's point of view, they are probably the lead procurement organisation, and not just themselves, but through the standards which they have, they drive the specifications and standards through many or almost all of the local road authorities throughout the UK.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Wayman, and I'm a Senior Technical Advisor in the Pavements team at National Highways. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this lunchtime seminar. Today I'll be talking about National Highways' net zero ambitions and our perspective from the Pavements team. I'll also cover some elements of sustainable procurement that I've been exposed to. Today I'll talk about the Net Zero Highways 2030, 40, 50 plan, which is our overall plan for carbon at National Highways. I'll particularly focus on the net zero target for 2040 for construction and maintenance and the key actions thereof. I'll then go on to talk about some company initiatives that will affect Pavements and also the specific Pavements team initiatives that we're taking forward in the Safety, Engineering and Standards Directorate. The Net Zero Highways Plan was launched to support DfT's Decarbonising Transport Plan in July 2021. It's a clear programme of time-bound targets with lots of objectives, some of which I'll go into more detail later on in the presentation. It clearly aligns with the 1.5 degree reduction goal of the Paris Agreement, and also refers to some of our other environmental priorities such as air quality, noise, biodiversity and climate change adaptation, which should also be progressed alongside the carbon reduction goals. I'm sure you'll appreciate that it's only been a few months for actions to filter down to us who look after specific assets, of which pavements are one of 9 asset classes. The plan is wide-ranging in scope and covers activities that we conduct ourselves and can otherwise influence. By 2030, the target is to reduce our own direct emissions to zero. This covers activities such as the energy that we use in offices and on the network, and traffic officer vehicles. There is also scope to use some of the softer state to absorb carbon. By 2040, the target extends to the materials that we use on the network and how these are constructed. This is the main area of focus for Pavements. The 2050 target is primarily about facilitating road use to become net zero. Whilst the majority of this will be achieved by decarbonising energy use in vehicles, we realise that we have a role to play in providing the infrastructure to facilitate this and the road space for HGV trials. In terms of the scopes of emissions according to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the plan covers all of scopes 1 to 3 and more. We aren't making a standing start in terms of carbon reductions. Some initiatives have already been progressed in RIS 1 and early in RIS 2. A few examples are presented here where we have provisioned for electric vehicles and facilitated modal shift. In specific projects, we've used hybrid plant and warm mix asphalt. Warm mix is now specified routinely and is being encouraged as our default option. There has been a carbon neutral scheme on the A590 that reduced emissions by recycling and use of solar energy to power the plant on site. It did, however, offset around 60% of residual emissions, and the aim in future is to reduce much more before offsetting, in accordance with the true net zero ethos. Here are some of the detailed actions against each of the time-bound targets. I've just highlighted a few that I'll refer to in subsequent slides. These are to develop a net zero or near net zero roadmap for asphalt by 2022, a 0 to 10% reduction in construction and maintenance emissions by 2025, and to require certified carbon management systems from suppliers by 2025. These systems are likely to be aligned to PAS 2080. There are a couple of key points on this slide. The first is that the DFT plan for decarbonising transport didn't cover infrastructure provision. This has instead been baselined in our own plan, as illustrated by a red bar. The anticipated reductions against each activity are illustrated by the blue bars. Net zero asphalt is something that we have to directly address in the Pavements team. A further point to note is Public Procurement Note 0621. This is being implemented by our procurement colleagues in maintenance framework provision. It requires any procurement over 5 million to consider the supplier's carbon reduction plans. The likelihood is that these will need to follow a standard method by 2025. Public procurement note applies to all parts of government, including executive agencies such as National Highways, when they procure products and services. As part of assessing a supplier's technical and professional ability, bidding suppliers are required to provide a carbon reduction plan. These plans confirm the supplier's commitment to achieving net zero by 2050 and requires them to baseline their emissions quantitatively in tonnes of carbon equivalent. The emissions covered are wide-ranging, including all of Scope 1 emissions from fuel combustion and company vehicle use, all of Scope 2 emissions deriving from purchased electricity, heat and steam, and also some Scope 3 emissions, which cover business travel, employee commuting, waste disposal, and up and downstream transportation and distribution. They're also required to outline their carbon reduction initiatives, both those already achieved and those that they plan to carry out in the future. The public procurement note applies from 30th of September 2021 and to all contracts over £5 million. So how are tenders assessed? Provision of a compliant carbon reduction plan is a pass-fail criteria. However, quality submissions can ask for much more than this. Ultimately, this is about alignment of the bidder to the needs of the procuring organisation. Alongside typical questions about commercial and resourcing type things, written answers might be required to address the following sustainability aspects. Safety. What are your arrangements for risk mitigation and management through to project completion? Do you have any mechanisms in place that drive health, safety and well-being in staff? Customer. This one is focused on the road user and how disruption will be minimised in the course of works. How does the contractor manage customer relationships and complaints? Environment. Here we're asking how the contractor addresses wider environmental issues such as air quality, noise and biodiversity. Social value. This one is asking about how issues such as equality, diversity and inclusion are addressed in the organisation, and if, for example, apprenticeships are a means of recruitment. Carbon management and reduction. Here the supplier is specifically being asked how they will align with the procuring organisation's net zero plans. How will they innovate to achieve carbon reduction and influence their own supply chain? These are all scored and contribute to the overall assessment of the supplier. Different criteria can have different weightings. So what are we in the Pavements team focusing on? There are three main initiatives. The first concerns reporting specific carbon footprints, and this is a collaborative project that we're undertaking with the MPA and Eurobitume. We're looking at the method to report actuals in terms of carbon footprint and potentially future-proofing for other impacts. The starting point here is aspect, and potentially we'll move towards EPDs, making use of concurrent SEN initiatives in this area. In the course of this, we're trying to address the methodological issues such as surface life. The second initiative is building the roadmap for asphalt towards net zero in 2040. The target date for this is June 22. We anticipate lots of supply chain engagement to be necessary for this activity and will be stakeholders on other roadmaps such as cement and steel. The third initiative, which we continue to do, is facilitating network trials and the switch to warm mix asphalts. We're also trialling things like longer life bitumen and more durable and higher recycled content surface courses. We should first have a look at how carbon data is currently collated. Carbon returns from area teams and major projects have been collected for a number of years using the Carbon Emissions Calculator tool. These have partly been used to create the baselines in the carbon plan. We now need to switch to suppliers reporting actuals in terms of carbon footprint. This will reflect where carbon reduction plans come to fruition and where innovation for carbon reduction and materials can be demonstrated. We also need to beware the unintended consequences of solely focusing on carbon reduction, and this is where EPDs that evaluate a large range of impacts can provide a more holistic viewpoint. Here is an example extract from the calculator tool. You can see that the data is not very granular for asphalt, with an indicative number for warm mix only having just been added. There is, however, provision for custom carbon footprints to be provided, as indicated by the underlined text. The method to do this is what we're working towards. In the meantime, we're using Aspect for this purpose. And here is an example of where we are requesting specific carbon footprints to be reported in relation to warm mix asphalts. Warm mix is now permitted via clause 908 for use on the SRN, and they've been publicised as a preferential option to hot mix asphalts with a few exceptions. This is the first pavement spec that requires reporting of actual carbon footprints. These should enable us to obtain a better default value and also to demonstrate the first significant progress towards the 0 to 10% savings by 2025 that we need to demonstrate. Another main initiative that has come onto our radar is preparation of a roadmap towards net zero asphalt for 2040. This will ask what can feasibly be done and when, and we need to take a fundamental look across the asphalt life cycle from quarry or refinery to deconstruction. We need to obtain significant input from the supply chain, and they've already come forward with lots of good ideas already concerning some of the technologies in the table below, from anything from long life binders to cold recycling, additives, plant tech, higher recycled content, etc. In the course of this exercise, we'll need to determine the carbon reduction potentials of each of these, and these should be assessed in the context of an asset management strategy in whole life terms. They'll each need to be assigned a technological readiness level, and we can point some towards the decarbonisation fund to accelerate progress where the technological readiness is less than others. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I've added a few links to key documents that I've mentioned that you might find useful here.
There are some very specific requirements relating to asphalt coming into the specification, and that's, for example, clause 908 and the requirements around that. A couple of the key words which have been keywords in the asphalt industry for years: durability, long life, and whole life costing. I mean, those are key principles which we've talked about for years, but I think they are really much more important now with, again, what's being talked about, sustainability, with the sustainability agenda. I mean, the longer you can leave a pavement in place, without having to reconstruct, then the better it is for the carbon footprint. And that may mean additional maintenance, but that maintenance has obviously got to extend the life of the full depth pavement. So.